Before we open the floor to questions, each candidate will have 2 minutes to say why we should vote for you. It is a strict 2 minutes, and I'll be holding it to my side. I'll hand you over to Aled. So Aled is acting as our independent chair this evening, so he's very conscious of the need for impartiality. So Aled's the independent chair. I'll be at the back taking minutes. Aled will run the floor. If you've got a question, pop your hand up, and then Aled will come to you. And that's it really. Enjoy your evening, and I'll hand over to Aled for opening Hustings. Thank you for coming. Cheers.
Thank you, Matt. Good evening, everyone. So, I'm Aled, as Matt already introduced, and we'll start with 2 minutes to just tell us a bit about themselves and the parties. We'll start on my left with Matt Tyrrell.
First go. Very good. Okay, well, I just wanted to start by saying thank you all for coming along this evening. It's great to see you here tonight, and I'm sure you've got plenty of questions to put to me and to the other panellists as well. I stood in this constituency in 2017 and the National Assembly election in 2016 as well, so people will, I'm sure, be familiar with me. I live here in the constituency with my partner Sarah and our 3 children. I grew up in Carmarthenshire, and I was lucky enough to come back to West Wales to work after I went to university. There are not many people get that opportunity, unfortunately, with the economy that we have here in Carmarthen West and South Pembrokeshire. So one of the challenges that I want to look at is how we can kick-start our economy here to take it away from being just a seasonally focused economy, low-wage economy, and start giving us an opportunity for our young people to face the challenges of what will be a harsh couple of decades to come, increasing property prices, climate change heading our way, and of course austerity, which has hurt us in this part of the world for quite some time. I'm fighting for Carmarthen West because I think that we can do so much better here. Britain needs a party in government that is on the side of ordinary people, MPs voting on the side of ordinary people, and in terms of LGBT community, Labour has always been on your side, from the very beginning in terms of decriminalisation of homosexuality in the 60s to the huge strides taken under the last Labour government, from civil partnerships to the repeal of Section 28 and the end of the ban on LGBT people serving in our armed forces. Labour has always been on the side of equality. If elected on December the 12th, I commit to stand up for you, to be ambitious for our communities, look at getting Brexit sorted properly, overturn the austerity agenda that has dampened the ambition in our communities, and importantly deal with the climate emergency that can no longer be ignored. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Alistair?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you again for coming and organising this meeting. The name's Alistair Cameron. Just to explain a little bit of my background. I grew up in Begelly, just down the road from here. Went to local schools, also went to Greenhill School in Pembrokeshire. Since then, I've sort of worked away from the area. Now moved back to the area in Pleasant Valley and Stepaside, and I now work part-time as a teacher, an English teacher in further education. I'll start with Brexit, because that's obviously a big issue for everybody, and the Liberal Democrats are very clearly a Remain party. And we really very much subscribe to the ideals on which the European Union was founded, and before that the common market in the first place, and that was to establish peace in Europe. And we think it's been very successful in that, and even now those ideals are so important. And I think the European Union has played a big part in the peace process that we've now got in Northern Ireland. Not just that, however, the European Union is important for how we tackle our environmental challenges in the future, and particularly I'm thinking about global warming, because in order to be successful with that, we need different countries to work together, and that can only be achieved through institutions such as the European Union. We also think the EU gives us massive benefits in terms of trade, really, for being part of the single market and the customs union. And, we have no doubt that without those benefits, our economy will be smaller. And we need a rich, prosperous economy in order to pay for all our public services. And that's one reason why it's so important. We also know, certainly in Pembrokeshire and Carmarthenshire, but elsewhere as well, that both our health service and social care system is under crisis at the moment. And what we would do as Liberal Democrats for that is we put 1 penny onto the basic rate of income tax in order to provide an immediate cash injection to deal with that crisis. We've highlighted areas that we'd like to spend this money on. One of the first areas is actually mental health, because there's a big disparity at the moment between people who get good treatment, good support for physical ailments, but not the same for mental health. And we want to ensure that people get support to the same standards for mental health as well. We'd also use some of that money to provide
Sorry, I'm
social...
still about the time.
Yeah, okay, leave it. Thank you.
Move on to Tim Simon.
Thanks very much. And I have a horrible feeling that we're all going to say some quite similar things this evening, and spent a lot of time agreeing with each other, which is probably actually not what everybody came to hear. My name is Simon Hart. I've been the MP up to the other day since 2010. Been around a little bit before that in various jobs and guises around the two counties that we represent here. My wife was born in Glangwili. One of my children were born in Within Bush. The other one born in just off Mid Wales when we were living in Welshpool a few years ago. And I hope in a way that actually one of the themes I want to develop tonight, if the questions go that way, is around equality and division and how we can, all of us, hopefully collectively, maybe independently, address that, because it is when I look back at where we were 10 years ago and where we are now, and I'm very much guided by my own kids, one who's 17, one who's 19 in this regard. I think we have come a long way, but goodness me, there is a long way we can still go. And like Alistair, I think there are a lot of other things at the moment which are crucial for the prosperity and good health of our area, which are being obscured by Brexit. In all of the elections I've been involved in, either as a helper or as a candidate, it normally boils down to housing, to health, to schools and jobs. Those are the things which most of our constituents wake up worrying about in the morning and go to bed worrying about in the evening too. But the big difference, I think, with this election is clearly Brexit is something which people are feeling especially frustrated by, either because they're fervent Remainers or because they're fervent Leavers, and where we are is not very satisfactory for either. And of course, the last thing which has come racing up is the whole issue of climate change and environmental standards. So I hope those are subjects which we're going to cover over the next few minutes, and that provides a little bit of background to start us with.
Great. So, Rhys Thomas.
My name is Dr. Rhys Thomas. A bit about my background. I'm a Carmarthenshire boy, born and bred, but then I went away. I've been 17 years in the military, and I've seen the worst of humanity, and I've seen probably some of the best of humanity as well. But what I want to talk about tonight is really about society, about tolerance, and about respect. Because I've seen what happens to people who have been oppressed, who have not had education, and society without freedom of expression is no society at all. And I think it's so important, really, for us, talking to you today, that we have an opportunity to be leaders, really, of society, and it's our position, really. It's just an incredible power, really, and it's important that this is led from the top down. That we're totally respectful of whoever we are. The most important thing is actually not how you look like; it's actually about what your heart is like. If you've got a good heart and you're tolerant of everybody else and respectful, that's the most important thing. Not what you look like and everything else. And for society to survive, you need that richness of diversity in society. And that then delivers an incredible society for us. So that's what I'm about tonight, and that's what I'm going to talk about. And hopefully, look forward to answering some of your questions later on.
Great. Thank you, Rhys. So,
sorry, I forgot to mention, Simon used to leave at 7:45. If you're wondering why he does get up. I did forget to say, maybe that was written down. So yes, there's an expected leave at 7:45. Sorry.
Save the difficult questions to 7:45.
Sorry.
Right, we'll start this evening with the first question being one of our forward questions before we get to the audience. So our first question comes from Sarah. It's very encouraging to see that the Liberal Democrats aim to have non-binary genders recognised. Do the other parties have similar plans, or do they change the law so that non-binary people can be married without having to be wrongly recorded as male or female on the marriage certificate? We'll start with Mark again on my left.
Wow, that's a big question, isn't it? I mean, I think we are kind of evolving in a way that we have, we've got to keep the public moving with the times, haven't we? So we've got a lot of changes coming in the way that people see themselves and in the way that people want to be reflected in society. Labour is looking at the Gender Recognition Act that we introduced in 2004 to introduce a self-declaration for transgendered people. But obviously there needs to be a cultural shift on a lot of this so that people understand why these changes are happening and how we can make them and being inclusive a reality, because I think that's where we've struggled, particularly in communities like Pembrokeshire, where it has been difficult for people in the past to come out as being homosexual, and certainly with the other additions being bisexual, but also being transgendered as well. Over the periods of time, while we're talking about it more, and as Simon mentioned, younger people are more open to this. There is certainly an issue when it comes to older people about bringing that new culture with us. And I think it's also about education as well, and that the Welsh Government is committed to changing the way that sex education is taught in our schools, to focus on LGBTQplus issues in a way that we haven't done so in the past.
Okay, thank you. Alistair Campbell, same question.
Thank you. Yes, well, in a sense, the question said it all, didn't it? Because what we would do as a policy is we reform the Gender Recognition Act, and as a result of that, we would recognise non-binary gender identities. And what we'd also do is extend the equality law to cover gender identity and expression. And I think it's really important at the end of the day that people should be able to declare their own identity. I mean, that's really what it's about. Certainly, people shouldn't have to pay what is now quite a considerable amount of money in order to have medical checks. We think that's wrong. And for instance, you should be able to declare your identity on your passport, for instance. It should be very simple. And so those are our policies. And for a proper world in which people have equality, as I say, they should be able to declare their own identity.
Thank you, Alistair. Somehow?
I think there's some question of the direction that all of the main parties want to travel in, and I think Mark Kelly's point about the way in which we carry public support with us is crucial, and it's a good opportunity for me to say that I think actually, I got that wrong in 2011, I think it was, over the issue of same-sex marriage, and I think it was, I felt I voted against it. I wouldn't do that again, it was a mistake, but I did it because I thought that we weren't engaging sufficiently with the old generation in the church in the area, and I felt we should have done more about taking them with us, and we didn't, and I think that was a mistake. However, if I was to live my life again, I would do things differently personally. I think the other thing on this is that we talk about our children's generation and their attitudes and things, and it's very interesting. My children look on in amazement that any of the things we're talking about were ever illegal in the first place. It is incomprehensible to them that things like police say just are treated as absolutely normal parts of everyday life were ever the subject of restrictions or law. And that forced me to ask myself some really sort of searching questions. My parents' generation, it was unthinkable that it would be legal, and my children's generation think it's unthinkable that it should be illegal. That's absolutely the direction we should be going in, and I think it's encouraging that all parties, no matter who's in government after next week, it looks to me like all parties will be as one on this particular agenda.
Great.
Yeah, I'm quite fortunate really, coming from a party where Gavin Price is the leader of Wales, and of course, Plaid Cymru were one of the first to support and legalise equality of marriage back in 2013. So, and I think we're still on a journey to get to where we need to get to, but I'm sure we actually will get there now. We're seeing, and people are starting to realise that it's actually now not about. It's about the person, it's the most important thing. are not about gender, the race. We can go down all of it. But it's actually about that person and what they can actually bring to society themselves, and that's the important thing for me. Going back to what's in their heart, what can they bring to society? And I'm not really worried about anything else. Not that I've ever been anyway, because I've never been inducted in that way, because I'm a doctor. I'm bound by Hippocratic oath, and so I've never seen it as an issue. So likewise, I don't see this as an issue. I am sure this will come and develop as we get the conversation going. But I know we were going to get there, because 10 years ago, or even less, you'd never believed that we'd have an openly gay leader of Plaid Cymru, who might well be the next leader of Wales as well. So we're getting there. We're on a journey there, but it's got to make sure that society's values about that everybody's created equal under the sun. And the key part that we can do there as potential sort of leaders of society is making sure that our children are educated appropriately from the start, that bullying is not tolerated. And one of the things I often say, I'm tolerant of anybody except the intolerant, and I think that's the most important thing, because a strong man can look after himself, but a stronger man should look after others, and that is our position in society. We have to look after others who can't look after themselves. So that's where I'm coming from. That's where Plaid Cymru are coming from, and I think we have got the most progressive values in certainly in Wales, but also we're continually looking at developing and extracting those development values into the future as well. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience panel? Yes.
I reflect on all these comments, and as a gentleman, I've probably attended the last 3 or 4 Hustings, and I've developed a speaking respect for all of them, if I can be quite honest. And I do feel that there's a sincerity about what they say. I retired recently as a head teacher of a comprehensive school, having spent 35 years in education, and one of the hardest things I found was changing the mindset of pupils, parents, in relation to minorities per se. I just find it unfortunate that we still have got leaders of parties making comments that are absolutely unacceptable about minority groups, whether it be based on gender, religion, race, creed. And I would just ask you all, what can you do in the event of your party having power to try and ensure that the sincere comments we've all heard tonight are conveyed back to those people who still persist in using totally unacceptable comments and descriptions of people in minority groups?
Thank you very much. Mark?
Well, I would say that in terms of the Labour Party, I think we're quite aware of the issues of equality as a political movement. We have always embraced people of minority, whether that be an ethnic minority, race, whether it be of sexual persuasion, whatever. Labour has always been on the side of those who are in a minority group. And so I think if I were to be elected, certainly I would be calling out wherever I saw it, those words of hate that have been peddled with such ease and such vulgarity in the press and elsewhere. I would certainly be calling that out, because there is no place for that in British society from a leader of any political party, be it the Prime Minister or anybody else. And I think that we have, political leaders in this country must now set the tone. We are heading into a new decade. We have to leave some of this behind us. We have to start uniting the country together, and we'll only do that with some care and compassion to our fellow countrymen and women, and that will only happen with a complete change of focus when it comes to how we look at each other, with respect and a will to ease the divisions that have been so easily created by Brexit and other things in this country.
Thank you very much, Mark. Alistair Campbell?
Yeah, thank you. I suppose several things. I mean, the first thing I say is that if I was elected, what I would certainly make a priority to do is to speak to the organisations that are concerned with the LGBT+ community in Pembrokeshire and Carmarthenshire. Just try and understand the issues within the communities and what I can do to help, and give them support, as much support as possible, and certainly raise issues either within Parliament or with any of the authorities. See what I can do to help. I mean, I have to say, I think it's very good. We've got the police represented here this evening as well, which shows that their interest and concern about this issue. I think with regards to the statements that some of our leaders make, we must challenge that absolutely whenever we hear it. I mean, we know, the Prime Minister has said certain things before we became Prime Minister should not be said now, and we must challenge them because they're absolutely unacceptable. The trouble is also that some people say them in the form of a joke, and that's how they always get away with it, and people think it's all funny, and it's not really funny for people. And we must learn to defend minorities, whether this is religion, race, gender, whatever. It's just completely unacceptable. And I suppose I'd also say, I mean, I'm a teacher myself, really. I think things have, to some degree, moved on since I was at school. I can see that, but I still do see examples of, people making comments towards gay people, for instance, in schools, children, which I find so depressing, really. At my age, they're doing it when it happened when I was at school. So it is still a big issue, and a big issue of people's attitudes. And all I can say is, any teacher, any member of staff, you must call that out, and in no way you must accept it at all, really. And you also must have the rights of anti-bullying procedures in your school or in your college, so that if people do experience these problems, that they can get help and support.
Great, thank you, Alistair. Seminar?
I have an ambition, it's a personal ambition in this regard, which is simply this: we will never be able to boast a society which is without prejudice and discrimination until we stop having to have, in a way, meetings like this and talking about it in the way that we are. That shows how far away we are, I think, from a satisfactory place. And I've spent the last 3.5 years, whenever it was the last election, on a thing called the Committee for Standards in Public Life. And I've been alongside a Liberal Democrat peer and Margaret Beckett from the Labour Party, with the three political people on this committee. And it has been our absolute ambition to try and raise the tone of public debate. And we have attempted through various ways to try and establish codes of practice, work with the Joan Cox Foundation, try to establish a more decent way of being able to communicate with each other in public. And that's at a sort of political campaigning level. And we are a long way off that being satisfactory. Still every day you will see in this election the sort of things being said in the sort of tone which I think are wholly negative and ultimately self-defeating, and actually a very bad example for the kids who were or are under your care. And I think it is really, really important. I think the leaders, I know I'm going to be timed down a minute, the leaders have a responsibility to demonstrate leadership. And one of the problems we had on the Standards Committee was lots of people talked a good game, but when we actually wanted them to sign up to a piece of paper which involved them imposing sanctions on their own members, it was like dragging teeth out of somebody who didn't want teeth dragged out of them. It was a really doing it. So lots of goodwill, no action. And none of the parties represented on this panel, with the possible exception of Plaid Cymru, were, because they weren't there, was innocent of that. And sometimes people say, what are the things which really drive your sort of political beliefs? This is mine. I've seen so many people either leaving politics at the moment because of this or not going into it. Good people who won't stand for the council, won't stand for the town council, won't stand for the assembly, won't stand for Westminster because of the example that is being set. And it doesn't stop at race and religion. It goes to all sorts of other elements of people's personality, which people in public think it's fine, as Alistair said, to be rude about. And by the way, to finish, social media companies have a role to play in this. They are absolutely complicit in lowering the tone of public debate and in increasing the elements of bullying and intimidation. And they need to see the warning signs.
Great. Thank you, Simon. Rhys Thomas.
I think it was Benjamin Franklin actually said, I think I was quoted it as well, but evil will only flourish if the good majority are quiet. And I think that's incredibly true, but it's also especially true of people in position of leadership responsibility. You have to do just that. You can't be quiet when somebody's being intolerant. You have to shout it out. It is your responsibility as potentially stronger man on all this. But that hasn't happened in society at the moment. So and people are far too ready to be nasty to each other, to be unsupportive of each other, and I sometimes call it the Game of Thrones effect. People, they're not just out to sort of undermine, demean people, but they will quite happily try and physically harm them as well. A lot has to be done about the papers, about the media, and not just social media as well, because I think the social media, obviously, they've got a business to run, they've got money to earn as well, and they all want to outshock each other, and that also has to be tempered as well. And we need much more sort of professional debate and respect for experts in society as well, because everybody now thinks that you can just Google something and 30 seconds later they know more than anybody else in the world about that subject. But that's clearly not the case. I call that the Trump effect. You've got, if there's an expert in the field, whether it's in environment or in medicine or wherever else, we have to respect their views. But that is also gone out the window as well. So to bring it back in a position in leadership authority, we have to call somebody out if they're being intolerant to everybody else. The basics of society is kindness and respect, and bring everybody back to that. And that's what we want. We want a society that cares and respects for each other, because at the end of the day, potentially it's your neighbour that'll be able to help you live longer, wealthier, and for help and support the environment as well. It's all ties in together in the circle of life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Reece. Following on that question, I feel it would be appropriate to go to our next forwarded question, a similar topic. There is a distinct lack of LGBTQ+ topics in sex education in schools and around. For example, speaking about exploring LGBTQ+ relationships, this could be seen as an almost shunning of the LGBTQ community and a failure to acknowledge them as conventional constructs in modern-day Britain. What are the candidates' views of this, and what would they do to change this and posit LGBTQ+ issues at the heart of education? Matt?
First shot.
We got a process which would dwell on Saturday, but as things in Hampshire West, start off in the same heart, so you all know when you're going to be asked.
Right, okay, well, as an MP, this decision in terms of education would come back to the Welsh Government, so it wouldn't be a decision that I would be necessarily involved in terms of how that would happen in Wales, but if anyone in the room is aware, the Welsh Government has been undertaking quite a significant programme of consultation on changing the curriculum. Part of that is being introduced very, very shortly, and some of the changes will focus on how relationships and sexuality are taught, which would obviously include LGBT+ issues as well. And one of the most controversial, I suppose, parts of that consultation, which has happened most recently, is about ending the right to withdraw young people from that education. So making sex education and LGBT+ issues a compulsory part of the education system between 3 to 16. I think if we want to have a rounded discussion on this and a proper debate on this, I think it's absolutely important that all issues of sexuality are looked at, are explored by young people growing up, particularly in their teenage years. As someone who went to a school back in the 1990s, I can tell you that sex education was very scientific, and there was very little regard for people's emotional well-being and support. And I think it's absolutely right that from as early age as possible, young people are encouraged to feel comfortable, are encouraged to feel respected in terms of their own personal well-being in terms of their own gender and in terms of their own sexuality, so that we have a much better understanding of how young people growing up are experiencing their world, but they can also feel active as part of their own community as well.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Pass the camera.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, it's already been explained. There's going to be a new curriculum is being introduced for Wales. It's actually under the Welsh Liberal Democrat Minister Kirsty Williams. And it's absolutely vital, and to be fair, I think it is, that covers relationships in all of its aspects and all of the different types of relationships. That needs to be compulsory, and it needs to be taught in our schools, as part of the curriculum, so that all children, now when they're growing up, they're aware of the different types of relationships, and they understand them, for when they go into the wider world. And it also needs to cover the area that I work in, which is further education. That must be very much a part of it as well. I would also say it's really important that schools and colleges have an effective anti-bullying strategy. I'm not sure they have been all that effective in the past, and it's something they do need to treat very seriously, so that students or children have problems, they know what to do, they're being supported, they're given the right pastoral support, and they're being assisted if they feel they are victims of bullying. And I also think that schools and colleges need to have the right kind of mental health support available in them. Again, I think this is something that has been lacking really in some of our schools and colleges in the past. They need to have the right resources to have this as well, but it is really important to have this. I mean, I'm aware of to be quite blunt, children who've been gay who've committed suicide, not in this area, but in other parts of the United Kingdom, where they've not really been given the right sort of support. I know that's caused terrible anguish for their parents over what has happened, and they've then tried to get redress later on, and they've not really had the right support. So this is a massive issue, and of course we then get to social media, don't we, which can make the problem so much worse, and it's where a lot of the bullying can be online. And again, schools and colleges need to have the right sort of strategies to address this.
Thank you, Alistair. So, Nat?
I mentioned earlier on the same-sex marriage debate back in 2011, or I think it was 2011, and I think one of the things that struck me then, that I had about between 600 and 700 letters from constituents in this area, and what made it slightly before the age of email campaigns, but it was still, and still is to this day, the most letters I've ever received on any topic ever. And it wasn't a repeat, sort of copy and paste job through a lobby group. These were individual letters written by people from all over the two counties of different age groups and backgrounds. And the thing that struck me as more and more of these letters came in was actually how woefully uninformed, I can say that now, I think 10 years old, woefully uninformed a lot of the people who wrote the letters were. They were heartfelt, they were genuine, they were polite, they were passionate, but they were wrong. At the time, I thought they constituted a much wider, probably a much wider number of people than they actually did, and it really just, as Alistair was speaking, reminded me then that we have a lot of education to do to remind people about what prejudice and discrimination actually means. And I also remember back when Tony Blair was elected Prime Minister in 1997, one of his early speeches when he talked about wanting a society free from prejudice and discrimination, thinking actually that's a pretty good ambition really. However many years on we are, I'm not sure we're there. Anyway, back to what we all want to do about this. Again, I think there is that I can foresee no circumstances where progress on this is going to be voted down in the House of Commons or indeed in Cardiff either. We're undertaking a big survey at the moment, which always sounds, big survey, big deal. But actually, the purpose of that is to try and get a better understanding of the issues, not just in terms of education, but also experiences in the workplace, experience in normal day-to-day life, and so that we can actually approach changes in the law, if that's what's necessary, in a way which is properly informed, rather than just a guess by a bunch of politicians.
Thank you, Simon.
Well, Black Cymru consistently supports removing any anti-LGBT legislation such as Section 28. I think devolution of responsibility for equalities legislation to Wales would be helpful, and we can come up with specific policies specifically for Wales. That'd be really good. I think the other thing is, the important thing is to normalise it. And the best way of normalising is promoting it in sport, in work, and in clubs and organisations. I call this the Gareth Thomas effect. With the Ironman here recently, that did a huge amount of good. By normalising not just being gay, but having HIV as well and living with it. And the ripple effect that had throughout Wales, and to be honest, in the world, I think, from that was incredible. I know you say some Hollywood contracts and everything else. But again, bringing back to the schools, I think some schools are excellent with anti-bullying initiatives. It'd be nice if that could actually develop nationally, especially if it was on gender or sex. It's nice to see that actually Wales now has a gender identity clinic in Cardiff now. That's just opened in September. So we are coming on. There's lots of things to do, but I think those initiatives would really help. And they're in the Plaid Cymru's manifesto now as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Can I just follow up on their answers to that last question?
Is it a question, or we're
just
trying to keep this strictly to
an observation more than a question, really. But while I appreciate all the comments, please don't assume, note to caution, please don't assume that every school has somebody in it who's the right person to deal with those issues. And I think perhaps sometimes some external input with somebody who's trained as a counsellor or with those issues in mind could be more beneficial than plucking somebody from the obscurity of the staff room and say, right, it's your job. So
I've seen that example of that in the military. Actually, you can do more damage than actually do. I remember when equalities diversity first came into the military in 2001. We had a very old retired colonel to give the equality and diversity lecture, and it was a complete and utter disaster from the first word. Because the first word he said was, "This is going to be completely black and white." That's how he started it, and then it just went downhill from there. Something like that can do huge harm by getting the wrong person to do that job. Absolutely, I support you on that.
Do we have any other observations or comment from the panel? Nope. Great. Any questions? Nope. I'll move on to our next boarding question. In that case, this comes from Joanna Sayers. On a visit to Pembrokeshire this week, Sajid Javid said the county was already seeing the benefit of the end of austerity. How can this be the case when the number of children and families using a local food bank patch have risen by 30% in the last year alone? What concrete steps would the candidates and their parties take to ensure people have enough food to eat next winter? Mark?
Well, the Labour Party's been very, very clear about how we would end austerity. We have a fully costed manifesto that we have produced. I have a lovely, glorious colour copy of it here, which I received in the post today. In terms of our specific issue when it comes to food banks, is that we have a manifesto commitment to a right to food, to legislate for people to have a right to food. It is a basic right that everybody should have, but unfortunately far too many people in this country are going without. Patch may have seen a 30% increase in food bank need. In the Trussell Trust in this area, they've seen a 61% increase. That's a huge number of people in our communities who are reliant on food handouts simply because their family do not have enough money to make ends meet. It's not because they are benefit scroungers, it's not because they're lazy, it's because there is a system that is staffed up against them and it's not working on their side. And debt is building at a huge rate across Wales. Personal debt is at an all-time high. 25% of adults are in a debt situation which is classed as distressful to them, which means that it is a significant level of debt. And if the UK government cannot get a handle on this, then we are going to face much further issues in the future. You know, we already have a situation where children are going to school hungry, unable to perform. In Carmarthenshire, the local council there is talking about ending free school breakfasts because the pressures of austerity are coming down to bear. We need a government that is on the side of the people. We need a government that will rebalance our benefit system so that people are not felt to be excluded. We will end universal credit. We will change the assessment processes for PIP assessments and work capability tests. We will end private companies from running those and bring it back in-house, and that will ensure that people are looked after in this country. Far too many people are now working but not earning enough money to make ends meet, and that is why the Labour government will introduce a £10 an hour living wage so that people who are working can feel the benefit of having to work and not have to work 2 or 3 jobs just to get by.
Thank you, Matt. Alistair?
Thank you. Yes, I mean, just starting off with universal credit. I mean, first thing we would do is one of the biggest problems at the moment with universal credit is the enormous wait people are having to experience till their benefits are being processed. And at the moment, I think people are allowed to, by the system, to wait for 5 weeks, which is simply unacceptable if you haven't got enough money to live on. You just can't survive for that period. So what we would do is we would change that, and the absolute maximum you'd have to wait is 5 days. We would also introduce quite a few changes to the benefit system. We'd end the 2-child limit that exists at the moment. We'd end the bedroom tax, which is totally unfair. We'd also end the benefits cap as well. We would also provide a legal right for food, as has already been said. I think that should be incorporated. I mean, we are still a rich country in the whole of the United Kingdom, and there's no way that people should be allowed to starve. Now, all of that is going to cost a lot of money in order to do the changes, and what we've costed it out, we would put in £6 billion in order to pay for all of those changes. And we've identified in our manifesto where the money would come from. A lot of it, I'll be quite frank with you, would come from remaining in the European Union, because that is our policy. And we think that if we take the Boris Johnson deal to leave the European Union, we would be about, the economy would be 2% smaller than if we actually remain in the Union. So that would provide quite a significant bonus to pay for these changes. I mean, if you talk to Patch about the issues, one of the biggest issues that Patch has identified is mental health. And a mental health crisis that a lot of people are experiencing, and a lot of the people that come to them who are absolutely desperate, it's quite often mental health issues. And I've already explained that one thing we would do to the health service is ensure that people who have got mental health issues, they're given the same kind of support, the same standards of treatment as the people who've got physical illnesses. And I think that is absolutely vital if we're going to deal with these problems of poverty and austerity in the country.
Thank you, Alistair. Simon?
Thanks. I mean, the first thing I'm going to say, so I'm hugely conscious that this is the situation is happening on our watch, and it would be easy for me to say we'll just buy a whole lot of cash at it and the problem would go away. But I think that would be a misleading and disingenuous thing to do, because I'll come back to the sort of UK politics in a minute, but food bank usage, for whatever reason we might believe that it is caused by, is on the rise in rich and poor countries across the globe, in left and right-wing countries across the globe, and it is a very complex issue. As we have spoken to the Trust, Patch and the Salvation Army as well. Don't forget, we've been doing this for 150 years, maybe more. And so the idea that this is either anything new or there was a simple cause or a simple solution is not the case. Believe you me, there isn't a politician alive representing any party who doesn't actually put their head in their hands when they're trying to confront these very, very challenging and work out what it is which is driving the need or demand and what it is that we would need to do about it. Because if there was a simple solution, I promise you we would be attempting to address it. That said, there are some contributory factors which I think are, I share with the other panelists' views, need to be improved. By chance was the first person to raise parliamentary questions about the work capability assessment back in the old days, and the fact that the huge number of people who were failing dismally, if you like, on their first test were then passing with flying colours on their second after an appeal. And this seemed very odd. How could people being so systematically failed and then passed in the space of a few days or a few weeks? That was something wrong with the system. The system has then changed 2, 3 or 4 times since then to try and get these assessments to be quicker, to be fairer, to be more precise, and to address some of the mental health issues which weren't coming up in the rather sort of basic, crude, vulgar systems which were in place at the time. We are not there any more than we are there on the benefit system. The universal credit is intended to be a fairer, quicker, more appropriate system, but it's a one-size-fits-all system, and the world is not one size. And by the way, like other parties, we agree national living wage increase from £8.20 to £10.50, I think is the commitment. That won't solve it, by the way, but it is a step in the right direction.
Thank you, Simon. Reece?
Yeah, this makes me so angry actually, because it's absurd really that a country, that 90% of this country is dedicated to farming and food production, and yet we've got over 200,000 of our children growing up in poverty and not having any food in their belly. How could this actually happen in this day and age? I think the first thing is that we need to realise that austerity didn't work. It was a failed concept from the start, and actually it's carried on failing since then. How is it that the crash was caused by the bankers, and yet we've had the poorest in society paying for the richest in society to get out of trouble? That's an incredibly cruel way of managing a bad situation. So that needs to be looked at. We need to relook at the way we do business in this country. Pension ages are going up and up and up, yet mortality is going down and down and down. Worse than that, child mortality is on the increase in the UK, which is an incredible situation. You've got people dying younger when they're children, and they're also dying younger when they're older as well, and their parents are outliving their children. We've got to appreciate that something is desperately wrong in society and relook at how we actually look after each other, because the situation cannot be allowed to progress any further. Where are we going to take it next after this? They're already talking about pension ages pushing to 67, 75 possibly. There'll be nobody alive to have a pension in the future. We'll be all dying in work and still being poor. Great, thank
you, Reece. Do we have any questions from the audience? Yes.
2 quick ones. Replacing universal credit with what? Going back to the old system or a new system? And the Liberal Democrat position of a legal right to food. What does that mean?
Thank you. Who you start with?
Yeah, well, that's something that we would have to look at when we get into government, see what the financial situation looks like. But for Simon to say that it's a complicated situation, it can't be that complicated in Command and West and South Pembrokeshire when in 1 year 61% of people weren't using food bank, and then we've had an increase since the introduction of universal credit in December of last year, where food bank use has gone up. There are some metrics here that can be related to the introduction of certain benefit changes, and it's the stress that people are being placed under going through these assessments. Continual assessments when their medical conditions are not going to change. And it's private companies who are benefiting from this process time and time again. UK government have wasted millions of pounds introducing a system that frankly doesn't work, and it hasn't worked for many, many people. And I've been with people to their appeals processes. There is no support network out there for these people who are already vulnerable, who are already stressed, and then have to go and face a judge in order to get what they are rightly should be paid by the state in order to look after them. That is the whole reason why we have a social security system in this country. We have all signed up to look after people who will find it difficult to look after themselves, and that's why it is absolutely important that this UK government, if it is re-elected, God forbid, next week, takes a serious look at the system that it has created and actually makes it fairer, because UN report after report after report tells us that disabled people and others in this country are being victimised by the state.
Thank you. Alistair, if you'd like to answer
Yeah.
other questions?
Yes, so first of all, I do have a question on the legal right to food. I mean, the answer is it's got to be enforceable through the courts. But just like at the moment, if you're vulnerable, you have a legal right to housing. You know, if you're vulnerable in someone, you go to your local council. Legally, they have to provide you with accommodation. The same thing is enforceable with us. If you're starving, then either the local authority or the government agencies locally have to provide you food, and we all have to pay that through our tax system. It's perfectly possible to have it, and it in no way is acceptable now that we're in that situation. To the question also about universal credit, I think the concept of universal credit was good, and I can say that as somebody who used to work for the Department of Work and Pensions, where we had to deal with all sorts of different benefits, and it was quite complicated and difficult. I think the trouble is, when it was introduced at the same time that there were budget cuts, so it meant that most people were going to be worse off as a result of it, and I think that was a bit failing. When it was introduced, there certainly shouldn't have been any budget cuts at the same time. So I wouldn't actually recommend going back to the old system, but I mean, there do need to be substantial reforms to it. I've mentioned earlier that this whole thing of having to wait 5 weeks in order to get your benefit claim process is absolutely unreasonable, unrealistic. I know you can get a loan, to try and tide you over, but in reality, that is not very effective. So I think if you have the proper reforms and provide the right deal of funding, I think also it probably should have been introduced a bit slower, really. We should have learned by our experience. I know it was introduced in a phased way anyway, but it was rushed through, and a lot of people have suffered. And that is one reason, not the only reason, but one substantial reason why we've got this rise in food banks.
Thank you, Alistair. Simon?
I don't think I've got much to add to this.
Okay. Chris?
I'd probably just like to simplify it, to be honest. It's the situation it's the economy is stupid, basically. Because the issue is that if you look at the whole UK economy, the whole UK economy is very topsy-turvy. It's completely different to the Welsh economy. The UK economy is about 80% of its banking and services sector, 20% of its other. Wales is completely different. We're about farming, manufacturing, aerospace, basically. And that's it. Now then, the issue we've got here at the moment, we've got the richest region in Europe, running the poorest region in Europe, which is here. We're the poorest region in the whole of Europe, West Wales. It's amazing, really. But so that's the issue we have. We have people who don't understand poverty, running and organising how we are managing poverty, and that's the huge disconnect. Two things really. Plaid Cymru offering £35 a week for the poorest families in Wales to bring 50,000 children out of food poverty. That's a starter. But the second thing is we've got to grab the economy by the horns in Wales. And that's why we're talking about the green energy revolution. Now, that is what we need in Wales to drive the economy in Wales, because our economy is so different. We need to work on renewable energy. We're the 5th biggest exporter of energy in the whole world. We don't get a penny for Wales for that. I can talk to you about water and cofiwch Tryweryn and all the rest of it. But even if we got our money for the water in Wales, that Severn Trent are selling, they got £500 million profit last year, every person in Wales would be £2,500 better off. Not £35 a week, so we've got to look at the economy. And our economy in Wales is so different to anywhere else, but if we actually worked on the economy in Wales, none of our children would be in poverty, and they certainly wouldn't be having empty bellies going to school and then not doing as well as they could be in education. Because I firmly believe that we've got the best teachers in Wales. The trouble is our children are going to school with empty bellies. How could they work? Despite having the best teachers, they're going to have mediocre results. It was nice to see the PISA results a little bit better, but honestly, we should be doing much better than that, and that's the way to do it. So they need food in their bellies, and our teachers then be able to get work done. But fundamentally, we need to drive the economy, and the Welsh economy is so different to the English or Scottish or Irish economy.
Thank you. Any further questions from the audience? Nope, I'll move on to the next forwarded question. This comes from Chris Paris. When Boris Johnson named his first cabinet in July, it was dominated by Conservatives who were either hostile to gay rights or so ambivalent towards them that they did not bother to even turn up and vote. He hailed his team as a cabinet for modern Britain. Does the panel believe that this is a true reflection of modern Britain or a sinister step back in time? For the record, 6 members of his cabinet.
Yes. You can answer this one. You go first. I'm looking forward to this one.
For the record, 6 members of his cabinet were against the introduction of a same-sex marriage in 2013, while 16 did not bother to vote on the same bill relating to Northern Ireland in July. Mark?
I really think Simon should go
I look forward to this one.
Of course I'm going to say that's a slightly weighted question.
As I said, how it came in.
But, you know, don't forget, it was David Cameron who introduced same-sex marriage and pushed it against a slightly unwilling Conservative Party at the time. You know, there were plenty of years before that when this was a live subject and nothing was ever done. But you know, for whatever reason, it was done by David Cameron with support of the opposition parties, and like a lot of things in politics, everyone's done it won't be done, it can never be done, it's all a bit of a stunt. But actually, it was done, and I was on the wrong side of that. I've admitted that, and I don't know, I can't speak for whichever members of the cabinet are named in this question. And the idea that people, you know, didn't bother to turn up and vote, by the way, in any issue, can be a little misleading. Because the way in which votes are recorded in Parliament and its ancient system doesn't really account for context very much. It doesn't account for abstentions at all. You can either be absent because you're in the pub, or you can actually be making a conscientious statement, and that is not on the public record at all, and it's something which actually deeply frustrating. Sometimes people may be in their last funeral, or they may be drunk, or they may just leave it, and it makes no distinction between them, and I think that's a mistake in the system. I think sometimes these accusations that one or other party is made up of, you know, people who are particularly much more sort of cosmopolitan or sophisticated than others, actually often hugely over-exaggerated. All political parties have people who embarrass us. You know, even Black Guy, as a smaller but well-respected one, we all have our share of people who make, when I see them on the telly, I think, oh God, really? Couldn't we have found somebody else to have done this? And people probably say that when I appear on the telly too, so I accept that. But the idea that, I would say this about the Labour Party, I don't actually believe that everybody in the Labour Party is anti-Semitic, and it's an absurd accusation. But there are some people who know the side out, just as there have been some some Islamophobic comments in the Tory Party, which are equally important. What matters is how we deal with them, and actually what our vision is. And I genuinely believe, I really do mean this, I genuinely believe that there is consensus across Parliament, and to some extent across politics, that, to go back to the original, prejudice and discrimination has no place in society anymore. We've moved a heck of a long way from that. And as I say, I don't think we should rest until we're in a situation where we really don't have this conversation anymore.
Would you agree, Simon? So do you agree, therefore, that having made that progress through David Cameron pushing through the same-sex marriage bill, you then teamed up with the DUP, who are totally bigots?
Can I come to the chairman?
Make sure everyone knows that this isn't a debate, this is a simple Q&A. So we want to ensure that all candidates' voices are heard rather than just one or a couple dominating the event. Is that right?
Yeah, fine.
Let's start and just move back to the order. Thank you. Mark?
Well, I don't know who the 6 members are in terms of the front bench, but what I do know is that, you know, over the space of time that we've had various prime ministers over the last 10 years, that the Conservative Party has lurched more to the right, and actually we've ended up with a front bench that is probably very unrepresentative of the United Kingdom as a whole. I mean, I looked at the front bench, particularly during the Brexit negotiations, and between Priti Patel and Jacob Rees-Mogg and Michael Gove, I struggled in terms of what they were saying and how they were saying it to understand how these people have got any understanding of what it is like to be me, or what it is like to come from West Wales, when they are putting their views and points across. And so I think, the one thing that we can say in the Labour movement is that we have tried to be as representative of the people that we are serving as possible. We are striving hard to get more women into Parliament, and not just women who come from a particular background. We have women who have been single parents, who have been part of the trade union movement, who are proudly standing in this election. And to be fair, when I went to a couple of the candidates' training sessions that have been organised, I was probably, quite odd one out really in terms of being a man at these events. There were lots and lots of women from lots of different backgrounds, ethnic minority backgrounds and other backgrounds, that we are trying to put forward to make Parliament a different place. Because people do still look up to Parliament. People look up to Parliament to see what their representatives are talking about, how they're talking about things, and how they are representing their communities. And we have had a pretty desperate few years. I think someone would probably agree in terms of the political debate that has taken place in Westminster and how people are now viewing politics, and that is very dangerous.
Thank you, Matt. Alistair?
Thank you. There's no doubt about that we do need to have a diverse cabinet that really is drawn from all parts of the community, because it's making laws for the whole of the community, and the only way that it can understand the real issues for people is if the cabinet is drawn from all parts of the community, and that includes obviously people who are gay, who are straight, from different ethnic backgrounds. I think that is really important for the cabinet. Just sort of on the question of same-sex marriage, yes, David Cameron was Prime Minister at the time. Just to remind you all, that was part of the coalition government at the time, that it was brought through, and I think really that was certainly one of the long-lasting achievements of the coalition. People, historians, when they write about it in the future, that they'll go back and refer to it. And I certainly would like to praise David Cameron for really facing up to some of the opposition within his own party in order to actually achieve that. And frankly, I'm pleased that Simon has moved on since then. So I think that is positive. Just to go back to what the gentleman said, I was certainly very uncomfortable with the Conservatives when they formed this minority government. They had to rely on support of the DUP, because I think some of the DUP's attitudes are very much in the past and really not reflecting on society. I suspect in Northern Ireland, and I feel in a sense the Republic of Ireland has certainly moved forward in a lot of ways, which is to be welcomed. So I was certainly very uncomfortable about that.
Reece?
Yeah, I think the other thing is, I think we've got to start stamping out on populism. Populism has got no place in politics or society, to be honest with you. We've got to be more sensible, we've got to be more evidence-based in what we're doing. It comes down to candidate selection, definitely, as well, and making sure that, as all parties, we need the best candidates, and they need to come from all backgrounds, because diversity gives us strength at the end of the day, just as any community. And then not be tolerant of the people who are intolerant, again, no matter who they are, what they are, from wherever direction they're coming, even if they might be leader of the country and everything else. It's really scared me seeing, President Trump going to America, the richest country on earth, and then this type of person they choose. Boris Johnson has not helped himself in the UK, but it's something we've got to now. We've swung right across the spectrum to one side, far to the right. I think we now need to bring it back into this area of safety, because I don't want to be in the same situation as we were in the 30s, and then potentially have wars and everything else in the 40s. We've got to bring it back to an area of safety where everybody does feel safe and secure, and actually society then can prosper in knowing that they're safe and secure.
Would everybody forgive me if I just with the message I'm just picking up from the last question being that actually what we really want is a West Wales centrist MP in the cabinet. So,
Thank you so much.
thanks very much. Sorry to.
Do we have any further questions?
I do
from
have a
the
question. I've no idea how to word it. What I find really frustrating about politics in general is that you can come to a meeting like this and you can hear individual people express really genuinely their concerns. But when you leave this room and the votes are counted, I can't see how what you genuinely believe is represented in what happens in Westminster. And I can't see how it is represented to us then by the press. I've got a real issue with the press. I used to work for the Western Mail. I was proud to work for the Western Mail. I don't read newspapers, I don't watch the television, I don't have anything to do with the news. I've stopped wanting to listen to the news, even on Radio 4. I've now turned to the World Service. I despair of what is happening in this country, because it seems to me, this is the second lot of Hustings I've been to, how possible representatives are genuine in their concern. To me, it doesn't matter a damn who we vote for. It really doesn't, because we don't have any real power. The people who seem to have the real power are the people who are telling us what's happening in Westminster. That, you know, how are you going to really genuinely finance what you want to do? How are you genuinely going to convince us that you're worth voting for? Because I think genuinely people feel politicians are pants. Westminster is chaotic. If you look at the Brexit thing, Mrs. May went and she did her best, and it was democracy at its worst. I can't see how we can turn this ocean-going liner round in the way that things are represented to us by the press. And I can't see how any of these really admirable gentlemen can do a damn thing about it. How are you going to do anything about it? How are you going to raise the money?
Okay, thank you very much.
Brilliant.
We can start with you, Mark.
Sorry, Mark.
Unless anyone else would like to start, you're very generous, but
I mean, as long as we hear all voices equally.
yeah, is that okay? So if somebody else wants to start, I'm very comfortable with that.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. I've completely sped, but that's the reason I actually have stepped into politics. You know, I was in the army for 17 years. I founded the air ambulance service. I was fully prepared to rest, put my feet up, not do anything more for Wales. You know? But I totally agree with you. I'm completely despaired. I don't read the papers and I don't watch the television anymore as well. I put my hands up. I don't do that anymore. And I think that's the problem. That's the problem. But I also think the party system in the UK, both the parties themselves and actually how we vote, also is old-fashioned. And actually, to be honest, I've described it as the age of the dinosaurs. You know, I don't think it's no longer about whether you're left or right, or red or blue or whatever. You know, the important things for me is. I call it the 4 golden circles. I call it the first golden circle is the environment, and then the other 3 circles then is the community, is health, and it's the economy. And those are the 4 important principles for all us humans now, I believe. The trouble is, you know, it's probably half a dozen people in the UK who control the media, but they don't just control the media, they control the parties as well. And I often say, who's the puppet and who's the puppet master? It's not Boris Johnson. He's not the puppet master, that's for certain. That's not Farage as well. They're the puppets, I think, in this game of thrones we have in the UK at the moment. You know, we've got the media barons, you know, and they effectively control what we do. And it's a drip effect they have in the papers every day. You know, it's the daily hate, you know, such and such has done this and this and this. And this is having a huge psychological effect and weight on the public. You know. And you can actually see how people actually now are turning against everyone. You know. And I sometimes think, our party in power at the moment is actually trying to stoke up that as well. Not stop it, stoke it up. For their own means. I don't know what those means are, but I certainly think it's got to stop. And we've got to start realising that actually, you know, we've got to start looking at beyond the media and trying to realise the information yourselves. But you're certainly not going to get the answer from reading the papers anymore, or even watching the television. But you will get the answer by your community coming together, meeting up, having those discussions, you know, each night of the week. And that's what we need. We need to stop spending time on our Facebooks and our iPhones and start pulling our own communities together, because that's actually fundamentally how you're going to come out of this. But you need a strong community to do that.
Thank you, Rhys. Alistair?
Okay, thank you. I'll make a number of points back in response to what you said. I mean, first of all, what you're feeling about democracy and the way it's operating in this country, a lot of other people feel like that at the moment. I think probably all of us know that from canvassing going on the doorstep. A lot of people say, why on earth should I vote for any party? People do feel very, very depressed about that. I understand that. I suppose I would say it's a general point. Democracy is so important, we have to have democracy, because the alternative is dictatorship, and the sort of governments you have with that are absolutely appalling. And so we've somehow got to get through this and support democracy. You raised a number of things. I think you raised a question of how much can parties be trusted with what they're promising, and whether, you know, as a country we can actually afford it. I think all I'd say is it's a question of looking at the manifestos, looking in detail, because all of the manifestos will be accompanied by some form of financial analysis explaining it. Now, I have to say I have serious concerns about some of the things proposed in other parties' manifestos at the moment. In fact, perhaps let's mention I have serious concerns about the Labour Party manifesto and what is proposed, and Arch can have a chance to respond to that. I just don't think that's realistic, and I don't think the country can afford it. You raised the question of the press and the influence the press have. You're right, they do have a lot of influence. I would actually say, though, that the press is a declining influence in society. It doesn't, I remember previous newspapers could always change the government, and they have poisoned some of the debate, I would agree with you, but they have a declining interest. What is rather concerning, though, we've seen the rise of social media, which can have, frankly, an even worse influence, and even on presenting false facts as facts, and how that is influencing the political debate. I think that is much more serious at the moment. Incidentally, I do very much believe in the BBC. You know, I've dealt with them a long time, and they do try and be impartial. They put a lot of effort into that, and I think we do need to preserve the BBC. I would, just two other things I wanted to say on this, really, that, you know, I've been a councillor before, obviously not been an MP, but believe me, people who are elected, they do take it, the notice of what the people say in letters, you know, just before the age of emails and everything. They are very much concerned, and you should normally find that whoever your MP is, your assembly members, you should find that you should go and see them, and you can influence them. You know, at the end of the day, MPs, councillors, whatever, want to get re-elected, so you know they have got a lot of motivation to do that. And perhaps the final thing I'd just say is on education. I think this is so important for the future of our democracy. That somebody who works in teaching, we need to educate children. It's very important about democracy, how important it is, and also to understand the difference between fact and opinion. That is so important for our future.
Thank you, Alistair.
Well, I think after a decade of austerity, all of our ambitions have been wheeled back when it comes to what this country can achieve. If it's not ambition in the classroom, it's ambition at County Hall, it's ambition at Welsh Government, because let's be honest, The 2020 budget for Wales is exactly the same as 2010. It's a line you guys will be repeating next because I've used it so many times over the last few hustings that we've done. But that means a whole decade where Welsh Government's funding has not increased at all, despite the cost of living rises that have been forced upon everybody, and of course increases in VAT that everybody ends up having to pay, the most regressive rate of tax that we all pay, regardless of our income and regardless of our wealth. And so what Labour wants to do is to make our tax system fairer. It's a no-brainer, surely. There are big corporations in this country who are simply just not paying their way. We all have to shop with them. We try not to as best we can, but there are circumstances and times where we end up contributing to their profits, but they do not pay their taxes properly. And so we will increase corporation tax. It will still be competitive in terms of how our EU counterparts operate, and we will crack down on tax avoidance. The majority of the work of HMRC looks at cracking down on people who are owing small amounts of tax. The big boys are simply not being chased for what they are, for what they should owe. And as a result, we are seeing a system where the gap between rich and poor is increasing. Those stark statistics that came out this week, where a handful of people in this country have the same wealth as the lowest 13 million people who live in this country. The majority of people under Labour's proposals will not pay any extra in tax. It'll be people earning over £80,000 a year that will pay a little bit extra in tax. When it comes to politicians worth voting for, I think, the one thing that we've got to do is to prove ourselves. And whether we're candidates or whether we're elected, you will be looking at some sort of record of achievement from our perspective. Now, I've been a candidate before. I have fought on issues and maybe not won them completely in terms of Willie Bush Uncle and Willie, but I have certainly stood up and stood with the people and represented their views. But in things that I have been able to achieve, I've put myself forward. So we've managed to keep the library open in Narberth. We've managed to make sure that the health board has taken over Pembrokeshire GP practice, and we've got a credit union open in Narberth now for the first time since the banks closed. So I think when it comes to looking to people worth voting for, you have to look at their record and how they will represent you. That's the most important thing I can say from this evening.
Thank you, Mark. Do we have any further questions from the audience? Any at all? I'll move on to our last forwarded question. Transgender people are often victims of hate crime, including violence and sometimes murder. However, although it's currently an offence in England and Wales to incite hate towards people based on race, religion, or sexual orientation, it's not an offence to incite hate towards trans people. Are any candidates able to explain if there is a good reason why inciting hate against trans people is not an offence? And would they work towards changing the law so that it is an offence? This came from Sarah. Thank you. Should we start with Alison?
Yeah, Jim. I mean, all I'd say quite simply is, as far as I'm concerned, transgender is a hate crime, just like the other aspects of hate crime, and it must be a criminal offence, and the police must treat it in exactly the same way they treat other hate crimes. No doubt about that whatsoever.
Great. Thank you, Alistair. Please.
I'll go with Alistair for the first time, actually. Yeah, I agree. I'm surprised it's not. I'll have to look into that. Yeah, it's as far as I'm concerned, the police I would have thought would be quite open to interpretation of hate crimes. I'm surprised it's actually not taken that. I'd be interested to know if this actually happened to her. It didn't, and why not? It would be my next question. But again, equality, diversity, I can't understand that it shouldn't be. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, we have to tighten up these areas of the law that currently allow for these sorts of crimes to continue. I think it's something that as transgender people become more comfortable in themselves, obviously they're becoming more exposed in their comfort, in expressing their gender. And I guess this will be an issue that we will have to face rapidly in the next, whoever forms the next government. Because we've seen hate crime increasing right across the UK, whether it's about race, or whether it's about religion, or whether it's about gender and sexuality. and people are feeling very uncomfortable in the country that we are currently living in. And again, it has to come back to government. Government has to take the lead in terms of how they approach this. They set a strong line, and that the rest of the country knows that line cannot be crossed. And unfortunately, we have had leaders who have made unfortunate comments over the last couple of years who now seem to have opened up the Pandora's box when it comes to the way that people feel comfortable in expressing their views and opinions about others, and we have to put an end to that.
Thank you, Mark. Do we have any further questions? Any at all? No? I think it would be appropriate that if our panel would like to give a closing statement before we go on to the Hustings. Anybody would like to speak first? You guys go first.
Okay, I don't think anything's prepared to anything. I mean, I suppose what I'd say is I'm standing as a Liberal. I'm standing as a Liberal Democrat really to give people a choice in this election, really. I think the lady mentioned two sort of problems in politics. I think one of the problems is the political system we've got. We need a proper system of proportional representation in this country, and I'm giving people a chance really to vote Liberal Democrat. It's something I believe in. I think we've got a very good we've got a very good record. I think our manifesto is affordable. We've costed it correctly. We've said where the money's going to come from. We're absolutely opposed to Brexit because we think it's going to make us all poor as a country. I've explained how we're going to pay for our health service. We don't actually think you'll get enough money just by taxing 5% of the UK population. We don't think that, or closing all the loopholes. We certainly want to do those things. But I think if we want a decent health service, actually we're going to have to require for more people to pay more tax in order to get the money to do that. So I think it is a policy, a manifesto that has been properly costed. It's achievable, and we really want people to vote for who you support, who you actually believe in, not vote for somebody else because you don't want somebody else to get in. So we're asking people to vote positively for Liberal Democrats, for a better country. Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. Reece, Mark?
Yeah, I'll go. I think times are changing really fast. I think what's shown, Westminster doesn't work for Wales. I think the London parties should stay in London. The lucky thing is we have in Wales is that we've got an alternative choice in Wales. We've got Plaid Cymru. We're only interested in Wales, and we haven't got the conflict of interest that the London parties have, which is always London. And I think it's important that we need to start thinking about that now in future, because our economy is so different. We need something different, and we need a different stimulus for our economy in Wales. And the only way we're going to do that is actually by voting for Plaid Cymru to give us a strong government in Wales, just like Scotland done with the SNP. We need that in Wales now to turn our economy around, to modernise it, to adapt it to actually how we actually work in Wales. It's very different than England. We've got to remember that. So it's not the case that one trick for the economy works everywhere. It doesn't work like that anymore. You can't have the richest region in the country leading the poorest region. We need different policies in Wales to do that, and the only way to do that is actually by voting for Plaid Cymru. And decisions about Wales should be made in Wales, and I think everybody agrees with that. And the only way we're going to do that is by having a strong government in Wales, led by Plaid Cymru and led by our amazing leader, which is our Parliament.
Thank you, Reece. Mark?
Well, I just want to thank you all for coming along this evening to the Hustings in Narberth. I think it's the first time I've been to a Hustings in Narberth, which is really positive. They are expanding across the constituency. I just want to talk to you now about some facts. And at the last election in this constituency, Labour increased its vote share by 10.8%, significant for us in terms of challenging the Conservatives in this area. It has made it a marginal seat for us, and we have been fighting with all of our might for the last 6 weeks, with teams of people speaking to people in communities right across this constituency. We have never had so many people out canvassing on our behalves in a real people-powered, focused campaign that talks about this manifesto. And our manifesto in 2017 went down really, really well. We have maintained some of the best of that, and we have focused on a green industrial revolution, because it will be constituencies like this that will benefit from looking at how we can harness a green new future that sustains our communities but also tackles climate change, one of the big three issues affecting us in this election. Climate change, sorting out Brexit. The only party that will really sort Brexit out is the Labour Party. The Conservatives will open us up to years and years of further trade negotiation. It is simply not acceptable. Labour will put forward the deal that we have already started discussing with Europe and the option to remain. And as far as I'm concerned, I am a Remain candidate standing in this election, because remaining in Europe for Command and West and South Pembrokeshire is absolutely the most important position for us to take. And then we have to end austerity. Austerity has held our communities back, it has dampened our ambition, it has weakened our public services, and it cannot continue for a minute longer. When we start investing properly in our public services, in our health and social care system, in looking after the people who need looking after in this country, we will get Britain back on track. That is the reason why I am standing before you this evening, because I think this constituency can do better. The whole of the United Kingdom can do better. And when it comes to your vote, there is only two parties in the running for this constituency this time around. It'll either be the Labour Party or the Conservative Party who will win. It'll either be the Labour Party or the Conservative Party who will win. And I hope that you will put your faith in me to represent you on December the 12th.
Thank you, Mark. I'd like to give one more final thanks to everyone on the panel, to everyone who attended tonight, and to Pembrokeshire for organising the Hustings. Thank you all. Have a good evening.